Alabama Senator Doug Jones told the New York Times he was outraged to learn of deceptive tactics used on Facebook to support him in his election last year. The Times reports a group of Democratic social media experts modeled their plan to boost Jones on the Russian campaign of misinformation in the last presidential election. The group also aimed to damage his Republican opponent, Roy Moore. The $100,000 effort, which was financed by LinkedIn chairman Reid Hoffman, was unlikely to have influenced a race where $51 million were spent in total. In response to the story, Senator Jones told the New York Times, "We have focused so much on Russia that we haven't focused on the fact that people in this country could take the same playbook and do the same thing." CNET senior producer Dan Patterson joins me now to talk more about this. Dan, this is so fascinating because this is the first that we'd ever heard of anything like this surrounding that particular race. So walk us through the specific tactics that were used in this Alabama race.
Yeah, so the operators created Facebook pages, although it looks like they also use Twitter as well, but primarily Facebook pages. And only a few hundred people followed these pages. But what they did do is the same tactics the Russians used in 2016, which was try to divide conservative Republican voters going into the special election, and even encouraged some of those voters to use write-in candidates. So if you imagine many of the tactics that were used against Senator Clinton in 2016, which were to undermine her credibility, her credentials, and to say almost anyone is better than her. The exact same tactics were used by these page operators last year.
And so Jones is denying any involvement and calling on the Justice Department and the Federal Elections Commission to investigate. But is it clear at this particular moment if any laws were even broken?
It's not clear, and this is what's so fascinating about influence campaigns.
Right.
They are clearly effective. Look, if you think advertising is effective on Facebook and Twitter, right? Influence campaign content is effectively advertising. And this content is designed to be effective because it triggers things that give us notifications and reaffirm how we feel. And if you get that little ding on the comment button every single time, you get a little dopamine hit. And when we see that these tactics work in a very legal sense when it comes to advertising, it's not really clear that posting something designed to go viral is necessarily illegal. And this is what kind of opens a Pandora's box of dubious or questionable tactics that are effective but maybe kind of walk that line.
It's interesting that this seemed to be like a test case scenario because according to the report, a member of the team behind this effort said he saw the project as, quote, a small experiment designed to explore how certain online tactics worked. Based on that, should we expect to see this in future campaigns? And of course, as we look ahead to 2020.
Yeah, the big lesson here is that technology proliferates and tactics proliferate. So when I say technology proliferates, I mean that the things that might have cost a little bit of money or even a lot of money just a few years ago, buying and programming bots were more expensive. Now it's kind of a commodity. So it's easier to acquire bots, it's easier to command bots, but also the tactics, figuring out that, hey, we can be divided when it comes to social media. Figuring that out required quite a bit of effort only a few years ago. Now we learned something that may seem kind of obvious in retrospect. Okay, the tactics and the technology are both very inexpensive. So what this means is that while we're all kind of putting together the past and putting these puzzle pieces together, the future is wide open for exploitation.
And so let's take a moment to take a step back, because in both of his elections, Barack Obama and his campaign, they were actually using Facebook to target voters and praised essentially for the effectiveness of that effort. And we have some of those headlines.
Yeah.
What, though, Dan, has changed about our use of social media in politics? Or is it just that our perception of all of this has changed?
That's the best question. I'm not sure that much has changed other than the natural evolution of technology, right? So Facebook is bigger than it was in 2008 when President Obama ran, but it is also more powerful. So the same things that did work in 2008 for the president work at an even larger scale now, and they work in places where Facebook might not have had the influence that it does now. So while we are all focused on the United States, let's not forget that countries all over the world have elections, free and fair elections, and that some of the tactics that we see here are not partisan. They're not solely in the realm of the Republicans or the Democrats or the Russians. They can and will be used by countries all over the world. So I don't know that much, if anything, has changed since President Obama successfully used Facebook, although Facebook did have embeds with the campaign to help them use the platform better. It's simply bigger and more effective today.
It'll be interesting to see how things unfold here in going into 2020. None of this would be possible, of course, without that infrastructure that has been set up by social media companies. So what can they do, or perhaps be forced to do, to better police what goes onto their platforms?
Well, it seems as though in 2018, there's not a week that goes by without Facebook saying, hey, we discovered influence campaign content and we have done things like remove these pages. We will continue to see this by all major social media platforms in 2019 and 2020. It is looking more and more likely that we will see some sort of data privacy bill introduced over the next 2 years, but it's not guaranteed. And GDPR, that's the European privacy regulation, GDPR-like regulation is not something that we will absolutely see here in the United States. We might see this, but the political future is right now, it's very difficult to see. It's opaque.
All right, we'll continue to watch it. Dan Patterson, thanks so much, Dan.
Good to see you.